I was abused and molested at a very young age, from the age of 4 all the way to the age of almost 12. By the time I was the age of 13, I wind up getting pregnant and having a child that was ripped right from my womb. And my mindset at that time was, no one is ever gonna hurt me anymore. No one is ever gonna be able to touch a part of me inside anymore. And I entered into prostitution very hard at a young age. So I went dancing at this particular club. When I would dance, it wasn't even about the people that was around me. It wasn't about the men. I can't even remember their faces. I identified myself as a woman that only had one thing to give, and that was my body. And so right across the street was this man, and he was preaching the gospel, and he was, at that time, I didn't know what it was. He just kept on saying that God got some water, that if you just take one sip of it, you will not thirst again. And all I know, I was irritated by his voice, because his voice was causing whatever that was inside of me to be irritated. So I found myself this particular day wrapping myself up in a coat, and I went across the street to this man. And when I found myself in front of this man, I opened my coat up and I looked him in his face. And the strangest thing happened. He didn't look at me, at my body, nowhere. He looked me straight dead in my eyes, and he said, "Sister, God got some water, that if you just take one sip of it, you'll never thirst again." And I didn't know nothing about this God that this man had been talking about. I knew nothing about what he was saying at all. It was foreign to me. But for the first time, I felt something. I was tired of living the way I was living. And I asked this God, this God I knew nothing of, this God that I didn't even know his name. I asked him for this water. All I know is that it wasn't long after I had asked for this water, I wound up serving a life sentence. The first time I speak to this God, the first time I speak to something that this man had been speaking that's gonna help me and change my life, it wound me up being here. I began to be angry all over again. I wound up being in the room with this woman who was known to tell folks about God. One particular afternoon, I said, you talk about this God, you talk about this Jesus, but you don't share him with me. And to my surprise, she said, "He's too precious to me. He's done too much for me. But when you get ready to hear and get to know him, you can ask me and I'll tell you about him." Well, it wasn't long after that, she asked me to come to church with her. I went that night. And when I went that night, the minister, she was speaking on John 4, that God got some water. That if you just take one sip of it, you wouldn't thirst no more. And it was that day that my life began to change and transform. That is one of the hardest things for a person that's went through what I've been through, is allowing someone to come into your heart. God doesn't want to come into your head. He wants to come into your heart. Because of my attitude in my incarceration state of being so full of anger, people instantly noticed that there was a difference in me. I wasn't angry anymore. And I began to tell people about that water, what happened to me. TBN Second Chance played a big part of my life. It gave me a different aspect and a different view of what God can do. And it let me know that the prison wasn't the end. Joyce Myers, mighty woman of God, spoke many words in my life. T.D. Jakes, an anchor, continue to pouring out the potter's house. That word that he spoke, just his ministry alone was able to give me hope, because he reminded us over and over again that God puts clay in his hand and he can remake it and remold it. So TBN was a lifeline to me behind the walls. It was like a daily bread. When I was released from out of prison doing 25 years and 3 days, I felt redemption. but I also felt accepted back. I felt full circle. Sometimes things can happen in our lives at such an early age or even at a later age that you don't even know what's going on. But I'm here to tell you, I promise you, that if you would just allow God to come in to your heart, and I know that's a hard thing, because your heart may have been broken over and over and over again. But I promise you, God got some water that if you just take one sip of it, you will never, ever thirst again.